installing tools. No more setups, no more of that crap. Everybody has working machines. We should be good, which means we can hit the ground running and actually code out some good PHP. So today is going to be the first class where we actually start working on our portfolios. So we're going to build the whole portfolio piece, and then when we're done the semester, you should be able to use that portfolio, copy a link to LinkedIn, right, and share that with prospective employers. So, and I do recommend having that. And I'm going to show you how to link up your Git account and all those type of fun stuff, your Steam account, because employers think that's quirky and cool and stuff like that. All the things that are important to them, right? We're going to add stats. We're going to have your objective. We're going to have all the normal things that be in a resume, but in an online format. And hopefully, if we get to the point when we're like at the end of the semester, I'll also show you a way to include a downloadable so that you can actually download, an employer could download your resume and print it. So the idea is that when we're done this semester, you actually have something that's usable, not just some random project we did in class to show you how to code PHP. This project will have two versions of authentication. So you're going to have authentication for you to log in and actually edit your content. And then you will have a rolled authentication. Ladies, please. Then you'll have a rolled authentication, which will allow people to be able to add comments or message you underneath a user account. So it'll be one user's table, but we'll have a role column in it that actually separates and gives you two levels of authentication. That's next week, actually. We'll talk about that type of authentication next week, which, I mean, totally kicks ass of single level authentication that you usually learn in these type of classes. Learning rolled authentication is something that you're going to get used to because that's more common. That's more common to implement rolled authentication than it is single level authentication. So cool. Before we do that, we have a small, tiny little 15-minute lecture, not very long. If you navigate to Blackboard and sign in, and what number are you guys? Are you 1? I think you guys are PHP group 1. Yeah, I think you're 1. Cool. Go to weekly learning. And of course, I totally forgot to actually put the content folder up. Give me 2 seconds just to add it up for you. And I'll throw the link we need in it. All right, I'll put it in here. Oops. Come on. Figure by this point in my career, I know how to copy and paste. Why is it not copying and pasting? Oh, because I'm on the Mac side and didn't realize I am. All right, lesson 03, capturing, selecting data. Cool, so if you want to go to Blackboard and click that link, that'll take you to our lesson plan for today and our lecture. Give me a second, I'm going to log into the back end of it. That way I can just do my little slides like this. Cool. Just before I get started, just not to be that guy, but I find it very difficult when other people are kind of like mumbling. While I appreciate the fact that you're keeping your voices down while you're talking to each other, I find it very hard and distracting to teach over top of people talking. It's extremely difficult. So what I would ask is if you want to talk, you're adults, you can make that decision. Please leave. Go talk out in the hall, or do yourselves a favor, load up whatever you're using, Discord, iMessage, Slack, and talk through chat, like text each other. Much quieter. All right? If you don't mind, please. Okay, cool. So let's talk about understanding Apache and MySQL servers. So at this point, last week I mentioned, we have some issues where people were having difficulty figuring out why their files were going from their file system and accessible in their internet browser. And the disconnect seemed to be that not all the files on your computer were available in your internet browser, only ones that existed in this one certain folder. And I think it was a bit confusing for people. So I thought we'd quickly just cover the idea of what a server is, what Apache is, which is a server, and what MySQL is, which is another server. So we use 2 servers in this class. Now, you guys took the networking class, right? And I asked this question to the networking students yesterday. I said, have you ever used a server? Now I'm going to ask you guys the same question. Have you ever used a server? Put up your hand if you've used a server. Cool. So the other class, same response, basically. 1 or 2 people put up their hand because they knew what a server was. But the funny thing is you've all used a server. You didn't realize it. You actually set one up in your networking class. How many of you worked with the router in your networking class? Should be every one of you, right? You all worked with a router. A router is a server, believe it or not. It's a hardware server. Basically what happens with a router is a router explicitly defines ports, right? It listens to requests coming in and then directs them based on where the request should go, right? So if I want to send a file to another person on my network, I can say, okay, I want to send it to this person's IP address, right? The request hears it coming in, looks at the path, and then defines where they should go in order to access that other person's computer and drop the file off. That's a server. That's exactly what servers do. All servers work the same way. They all listen and they all route, every single one of them. The difference is the other technologies that are built into them that they're capable of doing. For example, Apache is a web server. Apache has the ability to take files on your computer and decipher them and code them into something your internet browser will understand, and then deliver that to your internet browser. MySQL is a database server. It's able to take queries that you send in, convert them into something the MySQL database will understand, and then return responses to you through that. Both of these things do the exact same thing that your router's doing, though. They listen to the request, and they direct that request to the requested port, just the same as your router does. So, in layman's, what is a server? A server does exactly as its name implies. It serves, right? What it serves depends on the type of server it is. Apache is known as a web server. MySQL server is known as a database server. Both work fundamentally the same. They listen on an address and port for requests and return responses based on the information in the request. So the address might seem confusing. You've heard address before, right? People say type in the address bar. That address bar you type in your internet browser, that's a part of this whole same idea of using addresses to be able to access different parts, right? The internet is really just a big network. It's just a massive network. You guys made a small one with your routers, right, in your IT class. The internet is just a big version of that. It's just a huge version of that. And we use the same idea. We use IP addresses to be able to access different things, different other servers on the internet. IP addresses would be very, very annoying to hand around and try to sell to people and put on business cards, right? Because it's just 4 numbers. It's like 176.2863. blah, 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 right? And they're all different. That would be annoying. So instead we use something called domain names, right? Domain names are fantastic because they allow us to basically create a word that represents our website. So instead of handing out an address, I just give you the domain name, right? So google.com, seanmckinnon.ca, Dave's Bakery, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is. But those things are known as a domain name, and they're an alias for the IP address, the thing that actually matters. The alias, all it does is point to that IP address, and then the IP address actually points to the server location, right? So how does that affect us? Well, Apache has its own IP address as well. Apache, when we put it on the internet, will wind up with an internet-based IP address. But the one that we're using on our computers, they actually all have the same IP address. All of our computers are using a local IP address for our Apache, and it's known as 127.0.0.1. Or, does anybody know what the domain name for that is? Starts with the word local. Yeah, exactly, localhost. So localhost is your domain name. And unfortunately, we all have the same domain name. You don't have to, though. You can change it There are ways to do that. But for right now, the default is localhost, which points to that IP address of 127.0.0.1. So we wind up with an issue here. We have two servers that both need to be able to be connected to, and we need to be able to talk to both these servers, and they're on the same IP address. So right now, our uniqueness is not there. We need something unique in order to be able to tell which one we want to talk to. So we use this other piece known as a port. What the port does is the port says, I have two devices on one IP, but this device exists on this port, and this device exists on this port. So when you make your request, you need to tell me which port you want, right? So MySQL, by default, exists on 3306 or something like that, or 3607, I can't remember off the top of my head. And Apache exists on 8080. You can change ports, that's totally fine. What you can't do, though, is have two services running on the same port. So back in like week 2, when we were having difficulty where, you know, WAMP wasn't starting up or XAMPP was having issues, a lot of the issues that were caused was that either we were running WAMP and XAMPP at the same time, or we were running that MySQL executable that Andrew had some of you install at the same time. So we had two MySQL databases attempting to connect to 3306 at the same time, and they can't because only one service is allowed to access that port. If you have two services accessing a port, you wind up with something called a conflict, where either they will just shut down, like entirely shut down, or one of them will be working and it won't be necessarily the one you're expecting. So that's something to keep in mind. So what is Apache? Apache is a web server. A web server listens for requests and returns a response based on the request parameters. The important part of a web server is the security side of it. Web servers limit public access to defined folders on your computer, right? So a server, an internet server, when you go to google.com, you guys fully understand that those are computers behind the scenes, right? When you go there, you're actually accessing google.com's file system. That's what's happening. When you go there, it reaches into its file system, grabs stuff from its database, but the file you're accessing, the index file, is a literal file sitting on a computer hard drive. Just like when we access localhost, when we go to /comp1006, that's accessing your folder, comp1006. Those two things are the same thing, right? It's not some magic directory we created. It's not some magic web address we've made up. It actually associates to your comp1006 folder. And when we go there, it accesses that index.php file that's on that directory by default, and that's a physical file. Remember when we created it? That's the physical file that's sitting in that folder. So it's super important that we have security there because we don't want people accessing files outside of the directory we allow, right? We don't want them in our registries. We definitely don't want them in our registry. We don't want them into our user information, like our passwords information or our user accounts. Don't want them in our pictures. Don't want them in our documents. Don't want them in our downloads, right? So Apache restricts that. It makes it so that it's impossible, literally impossible. You cannot access any other files outside of that directory. You don't have access. You have no permission, right? So does anybody know the directory that we use in order to serve files to our internet browser with Apache? What directory have we been using? C drive is the top of the chain. Let's drill down a little bit. So when we had XAMPP, we were drilling into XAMPP, and then there was a file folder in there that started with an H. Exactly. When we installed WAMP, we drilled into WAMP64, and then there was a directory in there where we were putting files. What was that one called? Exactly, the www. So Apache has it set up by default, and you can change this. You can change where it actually points to, but Apache has it set up by default that it will serve any files that are in the www directory if you access it from localhost. So when you type in localhost, what it does is it actually looks in that www directory for whatever you type after the slash. If you type in localhost and you type nothing after the slash, it will implicitly access a file. Does anybody know what the name of that file is? Index. Index is the one it will implicitly grab. So you don't actually have to type localhost/index. You don't need to. It just will automatically grab it. It does it in a priority as well. There's 3 extensions that are supported on that file. One's called HTML, right, which everybody is probably pretty familiar with because you did that in your HTML class. You created an index.html file. There's HTM, which is super old and not used anymore, basically gone. And there's PHP. In order for the PHP one to work, though, Apache must have a binary installed known as PHP. What it does is when it accesses the PHP page, it uses the binary to decode it, convert it into HTML, and then distribute that to your browser, right? The important takeaway is that only files in the www folder are accessible from localhost. That's super important that you understand that. So when you download a lesson file, like we will be downloading lesson files today, when you download the lesson files, if you leave them in your downloads folder, you can't access those from localhost because it doesn't know they're in your downloads folder. It can't go through your file system and find them. It doesn't understand them. It will only find them if they're in the www folder, which we'll walk you through putting them there. So Apache, the one we're using right now, the default is set up and is good enough for what we're going to do, but Apache is extremely powerful. You can do a lot of crazy things with Apache. You can actually refuse traffic from certain areas as well. So like say there's parts of the country that don't need access to your application, you can actually refuse access to different IPs. That's what some businesses will do. Like for example, Amazon, if you're coming in from another country and you're trying to access Amazon.ca, they'll sniff that and then stop you and redirect you to your country's Amazon, right? Because there's no reason for you to be in Amazon.ca when likely shipping is not going to be available to you or there's going to be other issues available to you. Usually you can click that little button to force it though if you want to. But they'll use that information, and that's Apache that's running in the background that's doing that. It's sniffing your IP address and allows you to perform operations before the request even hits the server. Like even hits that www directory, you can actually intercept it and do other things. Apache is also responsible for reading files that allow you to do something known as a URL rewrite, which basically will take that address you type up in the top of the bar, say you type index.php, it will take the index.php out and convert it into a nice user-friendly URL. That's something Apache is responsible for. We're not going to look into a lot of configuration options for Apache. I just want you to be aware that you can configure Apache to do a lot of cool things. MySQL server, like I said, that's a database server. We're using MySQL. MySQL is the flavor of SQL that we are going to use. There's also MariaDB, which is basically the same thing. There's SQL, just SQL, which is what all of them are based on. There's MS SQL, which is Microsoft's version of SQL, right? So when you guys do ASP.NET, very likely you guys will do MS SQL or MySQL, one of the two, depending on the teacher you have. There's PostgreSQL, which is what I use at work. We don't use MySQL because we store JSON and we need to be able to query JSON, and Postgres allows us to do that. Postgres also supports something called GIS, which is geolocated information, and we need that access as well. And then there's also SQLite, which is like a super basic like database, but it uses SQL querying in order to query it. If you guys do mobile development, you will likely use SQLite. All of your phones have SQLite on them by default because it's a database file. And you just literally, if you wanted to share your database, you just give people that file. It's that simple. MySQL, a little bit more complex. So we're going to use MySQL, super easy language to learn. The good news is once you've learned it, any of those SQL databases, learning the syntax for querying them isn't really a far stretch. It's actually pretty close, only some differences between each one. The SQL server is going to be responsible for taking the queries that we provide, interpreting them, and sending them to the SQL database. And then whatever response the SQL database gives back, it will return back to us, the requester. We talked about IP and address ports already. This little diagram kind of shows you what's going on when you make the request from your browser. Your browser, when you request on localhost, will actually first send the request to Apache. Apache will send out the request to where it needs to go. So if there's any MySQL requests, then it will send those out. It hits your file system. It will not access your C drive or WAMP64. Apache will not look in those directories. It can't. It can only access the directory that's been configured for it to use, which is the www folder. Any questions about any of that? No? Good news is we're going to be doing that today anyways. So that will make things nice and simple. Understanding get and post. Do I want to do that, or I'll do that inline? I think I'll talk about get and post instead of doing more lecture. I'll just do it inline as we go about with it, because we're going to be creating a form today, and we're going to see both get and post live anyways. So we'll just talk about it then. All right? That way it's more interactive. Let's get the lesson files, but I might want to do this a bit different than I've done it with the other two classes. Let's create a new lesson file. Instead of me uploading a lesson file, we'll just create what we need. Go ahead and open up your File Explorer so you have it open. And last week I got you guys to create this comp1006 folder on the left-hand side. I got you to pin the one that was in the www directory. What we can do instead, if you don't have that or you don't remember, that is really difficult to read, isn't it? Hold on. Let me change my display settings and see if we can get it to be a little bit better. There we go. And I'll reduce my resolution a little bit. There, that should be a little easier to see. Not much. Part of it is the projector. Actually, that side's clearer than this side. All right, you can go into the C drive, navigate to WAMP64, navigate to your www directory, and then what I would like to do, if you don't have the comp1006 in this folder, I'd like you to right-click on comp1006 and choose to pin to quick access. And then it will add it as a favorite onto the left-hand side for you. So I'm going to pin mine, which I thought was already pinned, but maybe it's not. So now when you click it, it'll just take you directly into this directory. We're going to create a new directory. Just let me rename this one from yesterday. We're going to create a new directory. Just right-click, click on New, click on Folder, or hit Control-Shift-N. That'll create a new directory for you. Title this Lesson-03. And hit Enter. I'll zoom in slightly. If I do Command+, it gives me the magnifying glass. So this is the folder I just created. Lesson-03. So go ahead and create that folder. Now Windows does something that Mac doesn't do, and I kind of like it because it allows you to right-click on a folder and choose to open with code. If you have Visual Code, like Visual Studio Code, you can actually click this to open the folder directly in Visual Studio, which is super convenient. I'll do that way so you can see how it looks. So it pops up like this. You can see the folder on the left-hand side and everything's open. If you have brackets or Atom, you also may have that option. If you don't, though, all you need to do is go to File, Open Folder, scroll up on the left-hand side, click on your comp1006 link that you created, click on Lesson 3, and then click Select Folder. And that will open the folder in there as well. So with the other classes, I gave them already the files to start with. We're going to create our files from scratch because we have a bit more time than they did. They didn't have a heck of a lot of time. So the file folders, not so bad. They're going to look like this. We're going to first create an includes folder, and then we're going to create a users folder. What the includes folder is going to hold is reusable files. See, this is the awesomest thing about PHP. When you guys code static HTML, every single static HTML page you create has to have that HTML information at the top, right? The doc type, the different libraries you're including, all that stuff. And I'm sure, as being programmers, as you were coding out your sixth HTML page and literally dumping in the same template again, your brains were going, God, there's got to be a better way. There's no way I have to type this stupid thing out 150 times. There's got to be a better way. Well, that's the wonderful thing about server technologies. Server technologies allow you to do something called code reuse, right? Where you can actually create a template and then just include your template everywhere you need to go. So you code that whole HTML structure one time, not 9 times, just one time. So in PHP, there's a few ways we can do that, but I want to keep it pretty simple. So what we'll do is we're going to create 3 files. We're going to create a header file, a footer file, and then we're going to create a connect file, and we're going to dump those in a directory called includes. So right-click inside your project folder on the left here, and choose to create a new folder, or you can do it in the File Explorer if that's easy for you. And we're going to type includes and create that new directory. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see what's happening here. So we're creating a directory called includes. Once you have your directory, inside that directory, we're going to create 3 files. And most editors, the way they work is when you right-click on the folder, it'll give you the option to create a new file or a new folder. We're going to create a new file, and you'll notice that it should create itself inside that folder that we were on. We're going to call this one header.php. Okay? We're going to create another new file called footer.php and another new file called connect.php. So 3 files under the includes folder: header, footer, and connect. In week 2, we learned that when we want to code PHP, PHP code must exist between 2 tags, right? Has to exist between an opening PHP tag and a closing PHP tag. The other thing we learned is that PHP can actually be interwoven into HTML directly, right? So we have the ability to actually interlace it in our HTML, which is pretty awesome. So this connect PHP page, we're going to leave it for last. We're going to leave it where it is. We're going to go to header first. And we're going to think about all the different things we need in an HTML, right, to make a valid HTML document. So this should be very, very easy for you because you've already had an HTML course. The first thing we need, what's always the first thing we have in an HTML document? The first line. The doc type, right? Yeah. So I have Emmet, which is very handy. Emmet will automatically spit out the doc type for me. You might already have Emmet as well if you have VS Code because it's installed by default. So if you want to do the same thing I just did, it's literally just 3 exclamation marks and then you press tab. Emmet is super handy, and if you want Emmet in your IDE, I can show you later after class how to install it. All right, so we have our doc type. Cool. That's the HTML5 doc type, right? HTML4 looks different, but there's no reason to even think about HTML4 anymore because the web isn't powered by that anymore. So next piece, the HTML tags, right? Super, super important. We need those tags. We're going to need a head. Whoops. And we're going to need the body. And then last but not least, we're going to need a title tag. When we think about a page and we want to use it as a template, we have to think about the pieces that are always reusable. Like, what am I going to be constantly accessing and reusing on every single page and is never going to change, right? Well, already you're going to notice we have one piece that is going to change, the title, because each page you go to will have a different title, right? And you need that. It's actually bad search engine optimization if all of your pages have the same title. Google will index them weirdly and actually penalize you for it. So it's a good idea to make sure you have a different title. The good news is that doesn't stop us from using our template. We can still use our template. We just need to think about it a little differently. What I want to be able to do is give this header a variable. and the variable will have the name of our page in it, right? We all know how to create a variable in PHP, but we need to be a little smart about this. Because the variable needs to be defined outside this file, we don't know for sure that it's going to exist. We don't know that it's created. We have no guarantees. So what we need to do is basically say, if the variable exists, use it. Otherwise, use some default value. The great thing is that PHP 7 introduced a simple operator to make that very, very simple. Before, we used to have to do something a little nutty. I'll show you what we had to do. You don't have to type this because it's not necessary for you to. We had those, but we would have to go if set, and then we'd have to say, okay, well, my variable that I want to verify is title, which we'd usually put an underscore so we don't wind up with conflicts. And we do this thing called a ternary, which is basically like an inline if condition. So if it's set, then I want you to use the title. Otherwise, I want you to use my default title. I mean, it's not totally terrible looking. It works, right? But it's a lot of code. So now, because of PHP 7, we actually have the OR operator, which makes things a lot easier. This whole thing now gets reduced to and that's it. Nice and clean, nice and small, nice and simple. So basically what happens is if title is set, if the variable exists, if it's defined, if it's instantiated, it will be used. And whatever value is in it will be what gets echoed out. If title is not defined, then it will automatically say my default title instead. And you don't have to use my default title. I really want you to think about this. This is your portfolio, right? So do things that you would do. Does that make sense? Use titles that you would use. Make sure you use defaults that you would use. Think about your portfolio. In fact, if it was me, I would likely just write for my default title. I'd just write that. Just so at least something with some contextual sense would be up there. The cool thing about templates, all that wonderful CSS you're going to create, right? Those lovely styles to make everything pop and look beautiful, you can actually include in the head of this, and it will get carried from page to page to page, so you always have that CSS file. There may come a point where you want a different CSS file depending on what page you're on, and we will look at page-specific CSS at a later point, and also page JavaScript. Though any JavaScript we code in this class won't be longer than 5 lines. All right. In the head, we as developers, I don't know, how many of you are like pretty good with art and design and graphics and stuff? Okay. You're alone. You were the only person to put up your hand. I am terrible at it. So I'm going to use a library that makes it look like I do know what I'm doing. And that's called Bootstrap. Did you guys use Bootstrap in the HTML class? Awesome. So you'd be nicely familiar with it. We're going to use 2 wonderful libraries. We're going to use Bootstrap for doing our layouts and putting in common elements. And we're going to use Font Awesome, which will give us some very cool fonts to use. So let's do that next. We're going to navigate. Open up your browser. We're going to navigate to get. I don't want to enable you yet. Getbootstrap.com, or just type in Bootstrap in your search engine, your choice. I realize this is hard to see from where you are. That'll take you to the Bootstrap page. There's a few different ways we can do this. We could either use the CDN. The CDN is a content delivery network. The problem with the content delivery network, and what I've had in the past with students, is that when they use the content delivery network and Georgian's internet goes out, all of a sudden all your styles disappear and they won't be loaded because it's using the content delivery network to load your styles. So unless your system has cached them, which is not likely, they won't be accessible. So I find it much easier to just download the Bootstrap instance. We'll put it in our system and just include it in. So go ahead and click on download. That'll take you to this page, and you'll see the compiled CSS and JS files. Just click the download purple button, and it will come down here and just go there, the distribution files. Next, bring your cursor down there and choose to show in the folder, or if you're lost and you've closed that out, you can also go to your File Explorer, click on Downloads in the Quick Access, and you'll see it there as well. Right-click on it and choose to extract. Just choose to extract all, and just click Extract, and it will just extract it into this directory. It'll also open it up so you can actually see it. All right, so just to review, you're clicking Download, going to your File Explorer, right-clicking on your zip file under your Downloads directory and choosing to extract all. Just leave this the way it is, leave this check-marked, and click Extract. So now you have the zip file and the directory. It's always a good idea just to click on the zip file and say goodbye. Get rid of the zip file because we don't need it. It's just extra storage. Double-click into the distributable for Bootstrap and double-click into the next one. You'll see two directories there. You'll see a CSS directory and a JS directory. What I want you to do is select both of them. Hit Control-C or right-click and copy, your choice. I mean, you should be doing Control-C. On the left-hand side where we created our quick link, click on your quick link so it jumps over to your comp1006 directory. Those who haven't created the quick link, you need to go to C, WAMP64, www, and your comp1006. Double-click on your lesson 3 and hit Control-V so those get pasted in. So now we'll have a CSS folder and a JavaScript folder inside our actual project. Every week when we do a new lesson, we're just going to duplicate the lesson before and then add on to it. So it won't be downloading any more starter files starting next week anyway. Go back to your IDE. Make sure you have your File Explorer open on the left-hand side. You'll see the CSS directory and you'll see the JavaScript directory. And there's a whole bunch of files in here. The only one we actually care about is this bootstrap.min.css. We're going to include that in here. And the way we're going to do that, just going to create some distance in my head tag here. I'm going to create a link tag for a style sheet. Looks like this. Link rel equals style sheet. You must have that. And the href needs to point at that style sheet. So that style sheet will be in the, we need to go up a directory because we're in the includes directory, CSS, so back into that directory, and then bootstrap.min.css. One thing I find that a lot of students will do, see how bootstrap.min.css has moved to a new line? It actually hasn't. If you look at my line numbers, you'll see that there's a gap between 4 and 5. What that means is that this is actually wrapped and come down to the next line. So don't hit enter and have it forced to the next line. Just type and let it go. I turn on word wrap because it's a little easier than it disappearing off the screen for you. I can actually demonstrate that by closing it. You can see it's all in one line. Sorry. The next thing I need to do is actually grab the Bootstrap JavaScript as well. We're going to load this in our footer. We're going to create a script tag. We're going to give it a source. And it's going to be equal to .js/bootstrap.min.js. So that'll give us the JavaScript that we need. So we have our CSS, we have our JavaScript. The reason why I'm doing this ... I'll show you why. if you look right now, this is the root of our directory, right? And usually we would have an index file in here. We don't right now. This header file is located in the includes directory, right? I want to access a file from the CSS. I need to get out of this directory and into the CSS directory. What the ... means is it means move up a directory. So now I'm out of includes. The slash means start at the root of whatever directory you're currently in, move into the CSS directory, and access this file. That's essentially what it means. Every time we do this, I'll explain it so it becomes second nature to you. There's a few you're going to see that we're going to do over the next 13 weeks. All right. I think it's a good time to make sure everything's running and working okay. So I'm just going to stop my services, and I'm going to exit so I can open it with you. Let's take advantage of Cortana. Hello, Cortana. It says greetings. Type in WAMP. You'll see the little purple logo at the top. Go up there and click it, and don't, click yes, but don't close any of the little windows that open up. Those are all basically starting your Apache server, starting the MySQL server, and then the third one is starting MariaDB, which we're not even using. If everything's good, you should either have a little green W or an orange W. It doesn't matter if it's orange, as long as it's one of those two colors. If it's red, then we'll deal with that at the break. Jump over to your internet browser once it's gone orange or green, and type in localhost and hit enter. And if your server is running, you should see this page, the WAMP server page. Obviously, this is useless to us. We want to actually dive into our folders. So we need to access our comp 1006 folder. So to access it, we're going to hit slash, type in comp 1006, however it is in your file structure. So that's super important. Look how you've written it under your www folder, because it needs to be written the same way up here in the browser. Okay? Remember how I said the folders that represented here are represented in the localhost. Go ahead and hit enter, and you should see a list of all our directories there. I find this is the easiest way to navigate to where we need to go than trying to type in the whole address. Because now all we need to do is click on lesson 3, and then we're in this directory right now. Let's test and make sure the header file works. So we'll click on includes, and I don't see the header file in there, which is a little alarming. I bet you I didn't put it in the correct directory. No, I did. That's super weird that that's not there. Did I title it weirdly? Yeah, that's super weird. Why are you not showing up? Is yours showing up? Nobody has a header.php file? I wonder if there's something on the server that's causing it to restrict, so I'm going to rename it. There we go, header butts. Yeah, that's super weird. I wonder what is causing that. Oh. That's very interesting that that file does not exist. All right, we can double check to see why. Reveal and Explorer. It's definitely there. It's under the lesson 3 folder. Comp 1006, lesson 3, includes. Let me make sure the other files are there. Includes. CSS has all the Bootstrap stuff. JS has all this stuff. Boo. So that's parsing. That's super, super weird. Let's try restarting the services. Maybe that's the issue. Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense. Why are we not working? Unless there's an issue with the file itself. Don't do this. I'm just going to do this. That is super, super strange. I don't know. Let's try this file. Got to be something, I think it has something to do with the naming scheme. Yeah, that's super, super weird. How do I want to fix that? Let's try a different naming convention. I'm going to rename the file to underscore header. This is common for partial files anyway. And I'm going to rename footer to underscore footer. And we'll see if that fixes the issue. Yep, there it is. I have a funny feeling, as weird as it is to say, that header is reserved. I'm guessing that it's a reserved keyword. And for some reason, it doesn't want to let me have the actual file type named header. Of course, now I went ahead and did that change and didn't save what I did. So give me 2 seconds. There we go. And then, is that basically all we had? Right, we had the two things. Right, that makes sense. Actually, I think I can even just drag it. Oh, don't do that. And I'll add my script tag. Is it .min.js? Cool. Awesome. Yay, things. All right. Now I want to know whether or not my actual CSS is there and everything is working. This is where we're going to use the inspector on the right. The inspector inside your browser will actually give you information back about your web page. And it's very valuable information because it will tell you when things aren't loading. What it won't do, unfortunately, is tell you if there's a mistake in your PHP. It won't do that. But that's okay, because if you have an error in your PHP, and how many of you have had errors in the PHP so far? Like a good chunk of you, right? It shows up orange or it shows up white or whatever. It tells you what the error is in the actual main window. Things we won't know is like, hey, did our JavaScript load? Did our CSS load? We don't know any of that information. So the way we can check that is you can right click, and down at the very bottom, there's inspect. Go ahead and click on inspect. Over on the right, you'll see elements, console, sources. You want console. And we're getting a cannot read property fn of undefined for the Bootstrap library, which is totally fine. Don't worry about it. It's just the JavaScript side of the library. Actually, it might have been clear. Yeah, don't worry about that. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Oh, actually, I do know why it's doing that. We need Jquery. So in order to get Jquery, we just need to go grab the Jquery distributable. So open a new tab, type in Jquery, and click the top link. That'll take us to the Jquery website. The good news is that Bootstrap 5 is actually going to get away from Jquery altogether, which is good. That's good news. jQuery was solving a problem that no longer exists with JavaScript. JavaScript had a big problem with just cross-browser support wasn't there. A lot of things that should have been in the library weren't in the library, so jQuery filled those holes. Now, after ECMA 6 and ECMA 7, there's no reason to have it anymore. But we need it for today. So there's a download button up at the top left. Go ahead and click it. And we're going to download the top one, which is the compressed production jQuery 3.4.1. Oh, which is going to show you all the source code. Click your back button, right-click on it, save link as, and then we might as well just go directly to the directory because that's where we're going to do it. So just click on your Comp 1006, go into your lesson 3, go into the JS folder, and then click save. And that'll put it right into our folder for us. So once again, right-click on the link, save link as, navigate to our www folder Comp 1006 and go into lesson 3, go into the JS folder and click save. And don't worry about renaming it, just leave it the name it is. Inside here, we're going to need that file. This isn't a JavaScript class, so I'm not going to teach tons about JavaScript, but essentially, we need to make sure that the jQuery library has been included above the Bootstrap library because it depends on it. So it needs to come first. So let's do basically the same thing we did below here. We're going to create a script tag. We're going to add a source, .js, and I'll be damned if I remember what the name is. It's annoying. It's jQuery dash 3.4.1.min.js. Like so. And that is our template. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm going to just double check. Slack, yep. Oh, no. All right, I'll fix that after this. What I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start utilizing the Slack tool in the lessons. When I do big write-ups like this, I'm going to start pasting it into the Slack. So it's an incentive for you to join Slack because then at least you can grab this content or at least check and make sure that it works with your stuff, which will make things a little better. And actually, you know what? This is a good stopping point. So let's just verify that the code is there. Go back to your browser, hit refresh, and that error message should have disappeared. Yay, we have a blank page. We can actually see what's on the page by just right-clicking and choosing View Page Source, and you can see your nicely written stuff. What you will notice, though, something is missing. All that PHP code is not there. And the reason is Apache has parsed it, converted it into HTML, and then replaced it with whatever HTML was present. And that's it. So you won't ever see the PHP, and nor do you want to, because you don't want people seeing what you're doing with your code. You'll never see the PHP in your actual page source. You'll only ever see the spit out HTML. All right, so let's take, you know what, let's do 15 minutes, go all the way to 8:10. Gives you time to grab coffee, food, whatever you need to do, digest what you've done. It'll give me a second to open up Slack and add the files into Slack, and then I'll come help people who are having issues. All right, awesome. Okay, let's get back to it. So far we have our header file and we have our JavaScript and CSS stuff, but we can't see anything on the page. We're definitely going to want to see something on the page, but before we do that, what I'd like to do, take this header file, break it into its two separate pieces, because right now it's actually all one big HTML file. We don't need one big HTML file. We need the top part and the bottom part. So the logical place to break it, we're going to write a comment. And what's really cool, most like almost all the IDEs I've seen you guys using should support this. If you hold down your control button and press your / key, you'll find it underneath the question mark. It will create an automatic HTML comment tag for you. So I'll do that one more time. You hold down control and you press your question mark key or whatever key your / is. And it should create this for you. If it doesn't, just type it out. Okay? We're going to write end of header file. Then we're going to put our cursor a couple of lines down, and we're going to do that same thing again, control and /, right? And we're going to write beginning of footer file. So PHP is going to stitch all this together for us in our files, which is nice and handy, right? What we have to do is take this content that is currently sitting in our header file and move it to our footer file, right? So what we'll do, from that beginning of footer file, highlight all the way down to the closing HTML tag. And then we're going to use a command that you might not be familiar with. It's called cut. You can either right click and choose to cut, or you can hit Control X on your keyboard. Control X will cut that, and what it does with it is it sticks it in your clipboard. So now we can go over to the footer file and hit, I'm just going to replace my contents, hit paste. So Control V to paste it in place. And then make sure you save that file and save your header.php file. So just save. Jump over to your header.php file and save. Okay. So now we have half of an HTML file on this side and half of the HTML file on this side, almost like we made a magic trick and cut it in half, right? So now you're going to be like, okay, well, that's cool. How do I get the two sides back together? So what we're going to do is we're going to create an index file. What I want you to do on your left-hand side, if you have these little folders like this, collapse the includes folder just so you don't see all the files listed there. Makes it a little easier, right? And you're going to either right-click on lesson 3. Actually, you can't. You're going to right-click just in the empty space, not on any of the folders. So important. Don't click on the folders. Create a new file, and we're going to call it index.php. PHP has really cool ways that you can make little pieces of files because it's really big on the whole idea of code reuse, right? So you make it once and then you use it 100 times, not make it 100 times and then try to maintain 100 files every time you make a change, right? So they have 4 different methods to actually take the contents of a file and copy them into another file. The first one is called include. What include will do is it will take the contents of your file and it will dump it in. If you call include again and it's the same file, it will copy the file again and include it again. And it'll keep doing that every time you call include. The second one is include once. Include once will include it one time. If you attempt to include it a second time, it will just ignore it and move on. Then there's require. Require is a little bit different. Include, if it hits an error inside that file, it just goes, all right, and moves on. Require halts the application, doesn't let the application continue forward, exits it until you repair that error. And require once, require allows you to include it multiple times and it will just overlap itself. Require once will only include it one time, okay? So the one we're going to use just for ease of use and commonality is include once. So we're going to use include _ once. And I'm not sure, just out of curiosity, how many of your IDEs are actually showing you these hints? All of you? Most of you? Okay, good. So include once is a function. So you need brackets. And like all PHP statements, we end with a semicolon. But I've already made a syntax error. Can anybody tell me my syntax error? What have I forgotten? Super important. The PHP tag, right? Right now, I'm just writing raw text. And I can see that because if I save this and I go to my browser and I go to my lesson 3 folder, just the root folder, and hit enter, uh-oh, my PHP is on the page. That's not a good thing, right? I don't want that, so I need to fix that. So if that happens to you and you can see your PHP code, then you know you've likely forgotten your PHP tag. So we can write this in 2 different ways. We can either write PHP up here, right? And then close it down here like so, if we want to do it that way. But I mean, we're going to do 2 includes, and I find that when it's just a single line of text, like just a single code line, it's just better to do it on one entire line. And PHP supports that. So I'm going to move this up to here, and I'm going to move this up to here. And then the other cool thing, because this is only one command and I'm automatically terminating my PHP string, I don't need the semicolon because it's implicit, so I can get rid of it. Now you're going to notice that it's saying there's an error. And the reason why it's saying there's an error is because it's looking for something. It's looking for our argument. It wants the argument. The argument, which you might have already guessed, is a path. It wants the path to the file you want to include. So go ahead, add some quotes. We'll use single quotes just because we don't need string interpolation here. We are at the root of our directory. Because we're at the root, we don't need those double dots again because we're not moving up a directory, right? What we can do instead is do 1 dot. 1 dot says, from where I am, from my current location, I want you to move into the includes directory and include the underscore header.php file. Let me shrink this a bit so you can see it all on one nice line. So once again, that dot means from where this file that I'm typing in, is currently located. From that location, move into the includes directory and then access the header file and bring it back. And it will include that. Now I need to include the footer as well. And I'm a super lazy guy. So I like to use my IDE to its fullest extent. And in Visual Studio Code, don't ask me about brackets or atom, I have no idea. But in Visual Studio Code, if you hold down Alt and Shift, first make sure your cursor's on the line you want to duplicate. Hold Alt and Shift and press in a direction, down preferably. It will duplicate the line and bring it down. What's even cooler, let me add some more lines here. If you put your cursor on that line and you want to move the line but not duplicate it, just don't hold Shift. Just hold Alt and you can move the line up and down using your arrow keys. Super handy. So I'm going to put some distance between these guys. I'm going to actually put a lot of distance between these guys. And the only thing I need to change right now is the word header. And you can do it the old school way. You can do it like the painful, my mom doesn't know how to use a computer way, which is where you put the cursor there and hold the Shift key and go, that sucks, right? Or you can do it the little bit more, you know, technical efficacy kind of guy, where you can actually highlight with dragging. Or you can do it the super lazy Sean way, which is just double click the bloody word and it automatically highlights it, right? That's the super lazy way. And then I'm going to change this to underscore footer. Control S. At work, we thought it'd be funny and we measure our code speeds against each other. I'm almost at 200 words a minute, which is pretty stupid fast. Now, I know how to use my IDE really well. So I kind of cheat a little bit because I can type 7 words in one time, but just creating 7 cursors. So it's a little bit of cheating. But you'll get to that point too, where you just use your IDE to its fullest extent, right? So now what this is going to do it's going to put all that content in the header file that we have right now. It literally copies it, like literally copies it and pastes it into this file. And all that content we had in the footer file, same thing, copies it and pastes it into this file. And that works exactly the same way as it does in C++ or in C. If you guys ever work with those languages later on, it does the same thing. And that makes sense because PHP, its backend base is C. So that makes perfect sense. The interesting thing that you need to know is it doesn't parse it, right? It copies the content and injects it into your file. It's not going to parse it. That's important to understand, because if it parsed it, then you would have a lot more issues. It's just going to copy and paste. That also means any variables that you define come with it, right? So your variables are not scoped to this file whatsoever. That's important to remember. If you define a variable in your header file, you will have access to it now in this index file. So you might start to see where I'm going with this. This header file, we have this title. I want to be able to change that from any file I'm in. The same applies, that any variables I define above this includes will be accessible to this included file, which means in my index.php, I'm just going to hit enter, and I'm going to define a variable called _title. So I'm going to go php $_title equals my happy place, and close it. So I now have a title that's unique to this page, right? And it's going to get picked up in the header.php file. Probably one of the reasons why I don't like PHP, because that feels super weird to me. But it's just a convention they have, which you can use to your advantage. So to see this, if you open up your browser and just take your cursor and backspace till you only have the lesson 3 folder here. So it should be localhost comp1006 lesson 3. You can write index.php afterwards if you want to. Hit enter. We're going to get some errors on the right, but what you will notice is, what does your tab say? Your tab says the title that you created, right? And we can prove this as well if you jump back and hit, let's just put our cursor right in front of here and just do a couple of flashes like that. Hit save, refresh. You'll see the title has gone back to the default. So what's happening is this title that we have defined here is getting picked up inside this header file for us. Let's address those errors. Wasn't expecting those. Get HTTP host comp1006 CSS bootstrap.min. So the problem we're having right now is it thinks that our file for our CSS is located within the comp1006 directory, but it isn't. It's located in the lesson 3 directory. For some reason, we're not in the correct directory, right? We're up too many. So we can kind of fix that. We can instead use an absolute URL, which will basically say, this is exactly in this location. Don't move up any stupid directories. It's right here. So the way we do that, let's go back to our header.php file. Right now, we're moving a couple of directories up. We can actually just do a dot, I believe, in that file. So switch that to a dot. And then in the footer file, we need to do the same thing. We need to change these guys to just dot slash. So instead of 2 dots, it's 1 dot. So in the header file, change it from dot dot CSS to just dot. And then in the footer file, change it from dot dot JS to just dot. So now if you go back to your browser, hit Control R, those errors disappear. We see my happy place. And now we have an index file that we can now work with and do whatever we want to, which is kind of fun. So let's manipulate our index file. Look at all this wonderful space we have here in the middle. This is like a blank slate for us to do whatever we want. So Bootstrap creates all these wonderful CSS classes for you that you can just use, right? And it makes it super easy because it's common things. The reason why Bootstrap was created is because Twitter designers were getting super angry with Twitter developers because Twitter developers like me can't design at all. So what Twitter designers were doing is they said, okay, we're going to come up with a CSS framework. We're going to give it to you. You're going to use it so that your work doesn't look like crap, was basically the idea. I don't care who you are. If you use Twitter Bootstrap and you learn how to use those components, it always looks good. It just always looks good. It always looks like Bootstrap, but it always looks good. So one of the things I like is, what the heck are these random numbers? I feel like I'm in the show Lost. All right, there's no chalk. Of course there's no chalk. Well, that sucks. All right, picture a square. All right, so I've got a square. You know how in websites you don't usually have content way over here? It's kind of nicely centered, right? To do that in CSS is kind of annoying because now you have to basically say there's two margins and I want you to take all this content here and center it, right? And it's like 6 or 7 lines of code to get it to do that. The cool thing in Bootstrap is you don't have to do that. Now you have Emmet, right, installed on your VS Code? Is it working right off the bat? Like, were you able to do the triple thing? Okay, so Emmet actually gives you some other cool features. For example, if I'm going to create a div, and I know it's a div, but I have classes in it, I can literally just do the classes. So I can say .container, like so, hit tab, and it will automatically create a div with the class container in it. And you can append those. You can do dot again and do a different class, and it will just keep adding them for you. What the container class does is it actually does that nice centered piece of content for us auto-magically. So it's going to put it right in the center for us automatically. Let's add a header. I mean, why not, right? So we'll create a header. Okay, so there's our header. We'll create an H1. And we'll even do some like kind of craziness here. We'll do your name, right? Okay, add your name in there. Let's put it on the next line and tab it in. Nope, I didn't open Slack. There we go. And then just underneath your name, we're going to add another tag called small. And I'm just going to write a dash, like so, and say, what am I going to say? There we go. Nice and humble. My portfolio, I want to impress. So that's cool. I have a header. I have my H1 tag. I have a little bit of a blurb about me, right? All that's in there. I'm using some nice Bootstrap containers, so everything's going to be nicely in the center column. Don't worry, we're going to make it look a little better. Going a little far considering none of this is PHP. This is just HTML. All right, who's still typing? We good? If you have to type, you can type. Don't feel like you have to stop. All right, cool. Let's jump over to the browser and just take a look at what we've actually created. Hit Control-R. Nice. Sean McKinnon is super awesome. All right, let's clean it up a little bit. Don't like how it's all on one line like that. Want to move it to the next line. So let's add a BR tag just below our name. Maybe get rid of that dash because we don't really need it anymore. But I also want to take care of one other issue. If you noticed, Sean McKinnon was right up against the top edge of the address bar. That looks gross. We want to move it down just a little bit. And we could open up a new style sheet and type out a new style to adjust the margin. Or in our header, let's create a new class. And we're going to use one of the helper utilities that Bootstrap has built in. It's called margin. It starts with the letter M. Then you can give it a second letter that defines its direction. So MT means top, MB means bottom, ML means left, MR means right? Then you do dash and a number, 1 to 5. And it will actually move it so many pixels, I can't remember, it's like a perfect balance in the world of design, the distance down that you need. I need to move from the top down, so we're going to use MT-5. So we have tons of distance from the top of the edge of the page to our actual header class. And then it's kind of garish, but I love them. We're going to make it a Jumbotron, which sounds like an overweight transformer. So now we're going to do Jumbotron. Favorite line from the Transformers movie. Where'd you learn English? From the World Wide Web. I just love the way he says it. World Wide Web. So now you have a Jumbotron, and it's 5 whatever measurement unit they're using down, and it's in a nice little condensed container. And whether you have design skills or not, it totally doesn't matter. Hit Control-R. Look at, we have a Jumbotron. Oh my God, the worst projector in the world. You can't even see my gray. But you should see a gray box on your screen, right? You can't see the gray because this projector sucks. Not enough contrast ratio. So cool. Obviously, none of that has anything to do with PHP, but we have some nice styling, right? And there's so many more. That Bootstrap website that I had you go to, if you click on documentation and click on components, you can see there's tons of different things you can create, including things like carousels, which is like with the picture sliders. There's forms, there's input groups, there's our Jumbotron, right? Hello world. You can actually do a lot of cool things with the Jumbotron, make it look really nice and unique. But this is super handy. This is known as the Css Framework. There are others as well. The most common ones are the Materials Framework, which a lot of people like if they're doing like dashboards and stuff with graphs and things. And then there's Foundation, which is like a direct competitor with the Bootstrap Framework. So there are those frameworks, and you are welcome to use those in your projects as your design style, okay? Cool. So, my happy place. Yay, Sean McKinnon is super awesome. Awesome. All right, let's do our next little bit. So I have my index file. I need a menu because I want a menu that points to the resources we're going to create. And eventually we're going to create a login form, and we're going to have a registration form, and we want people to be able to log into those things. We're also going to want to restrict access to things as well and say you can't even see this thing because you don't have access. So in order to do that, we're going to create a nav. And the navs can be a little annoying to create. I know I always have to look it up because it's kind of like a large bootstrappy thing. To today, Junior, the heck's happening here? The internet out? I think the internet might be out on my tablet. Whoop. Wi-Fi. Ah, it says it's in. I think you are a liar. Oh, there we go. All right. There we go. Stop that. Remember my choice and don't ask me again. I think it's actually this. Yeah, it's, oh, wow, it's a really crappy cord. That'll do it. Yes, don't touch anything. Don't breathe. All right. Oh, I didn't. I thought I added it. Maybe I didn't add it. All right, no worries. We're going to kind of wing it a little bit just because I can never remember the code base for this. Actually, I'll just pull up Get Bootstrap, and then it won't be so bad. There we go. Documentation, components, Navbar. We're going to use the Navbar. All right. So I want my nav bar. Now the container makes the page nice and centered, but I don't want my nav bar to be centered. I want my nav bar to be the full width of the page, right? So I'm going to add it to the thing, but you know what? I don't want to just jam my nav bar into this index page because my navigation needs to be available across my whole site. So instead, what makes more sense is either to A, include it in the header file, right? Or create its own file. That way we can choose where we want to include it, which might make more sense because at times we may want to have like an admin menu instead and like have a different menu based on the person's role, right? So we're going to create it separately so we have lots of opportunity and options to do what we want. So right click on your includes folder and create a new file. And you're going to call this one main-nav.php. So main-nav.php. Actually, sorry, underscore main dot. We might as well keep the naming convention we're using. Let's do underscore main-nav.php. Oops, opening one when I already have one open. All right. Right now, we don't need a lot of PHP in this, but we will have PHP because we will have logic-based menu items that only show if you're logged in and don't show if you're not. But we do need the other bits and pieces in here. So the first bit we need is to tell it it's a nav. And I'm just going to collapse my left side menu so you can see what I'm doing. The class is, yeah, mate. Yep, we'll just include it right directly in. We can either put it in the header file if we wanted to, so it gets included at all times, or if we want more control over it, we'll add it to the particular files that we want it in, right? All right, let's do class equals. The first is Navbar, then Navbar expand, then Navbar. I kind of want dark. We'll just do light because that's what the example shows for now. And then BG is in background light. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 classes altogether. Navbar, Navbar expand, Navbar light, BG light. And they're separated using spaces. All right. We need like a little link to the left that you can use kind of as a home button. So we'll do A class equals navbar dash brand. And the ref will be equal to just a slash. And then this is like a little brand icon that goes off in the left, and you can actually eventually replace this with an image if you choose. For now, I'm just going to use my initials because I don't want to write my whole name out. So I'll just use SM. Actually, I'll do the classic one. I'll even include my middle name, SCM, Sean Cameron McKinnon. Next, we need the little toggle button. So Bootstrap does one very cool thing for you. When you guys were doing HTML, I'm sure you heard responsive web, responsive web, responsive web, develop for mobile, develop for mobile. Well, Bootstrap does that automatically for you, that when your page reduces, components will immediately abide by the dimensions of that screen. So it's immediately fluid, right? So this is the same case with the nav. When the nav hits a point, it will actually collapse and disappear, and you'll get a little hamburger icon that you can actually click and utilize, right? Which is super handy. So the way we do that, though, is we have to include this button. Okay. And the button is going to have a class called Navbar-Toggle. It has an attribute called button. Has a data attribute called toggle with the value of collapse. There's a lot of things that have to be written for these. A data attribute called target, which is equal to hashtag Navbar support, currently trending on Twitter. Oh, support contents actually. Has area control. I hate this thing. This is so much writing. Navbar supported content. I will definitely copy and paste this into Slack for you. Expanded equals false. And area label equals toggle navigation. So just a few hundred things. Super annoying, I know. And then we're not even done, because you'll notice that that's the opening tag, that's the closing tag, and there's nothing in the middle right now for content. So hit enter and put yourself in the middle between those two tags, right? And in the middle, we're going to add a span. So this is span class equals navbar-toggler-icon, and close it. So that's actually going to be the hamburger icon that you see. When I say hamburger icon, who took the damn chalk? When you see hamburger icon, it's like 3 lines stacked. We'll see it in a minute. So that's a lot, right? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't want to type all this out and you have Slack and you're joined to the Slack channel, I am going to copy this when we're done and paste it into the Slack channel. All right, so we also need the actual thing itself. The way Bootstrap has broken it up is it's basically wrapped this whole thing in a nav and said, this is your nav bar, right? And that actually just creates the gray bar across the top of the screen. The first A is the first element, which is your brand, right? Usually you put your logo there or whatever. The next thing is the toggle button, so that when the screen gets too small, it creates the little hamburger icon and allows it to be toggled up and down. The next block is where all of our menu items are going to go. So think about all the different nav items that you would need. They're going to go in the next block. So we need a div, and I'm going to teach you another way to write this. So I'm going to write it out. If you have VS Code, you can literally follow it the way I'm writing it. If you don't, you're going to have to wait till I'm done. The way it looks is like this. It's div.collapse.navbar-collapse, like so. And then when you hit tab, it spits it out. If you don't have VS Code, you need to type it that way. Then we also need to give it an ID of Navbar supported content. So this is the div that wraps around it, and you'll notice it has this Navbar supported content, and you'll notice also that the data target on this button is Navbar supported content. And that's not coincidental. So what happens is JavaScript, when you click that little toggle, when your screen is reduced and you have the hamburger icon, and you click it, it calls JavaScript and will literally affect this thing to show it or hide it. We're going to do a list, an unordered list. And we're going to pull it to the left. So it's going to be, we need to add a class on the UL. So it's class equals navbar-nav space mr-auto. And then we're going to need another one of these underneath it. UL class equals navbar-nav ml-auto. So what this is going to do is it's going to give us 2 potential navigation places. This one will appear on the left side of your nav bar, and this one will appear on the right side of the nav bar. So what I like to do, just for a design thing, I put like my home and the about page and all that kind of stuff in this one. And then I put my login, register, and log out in this one so that my authentication pieces stay on the right. So let's add some menu items. Super easy. We create a list item. We can also write it in the nice shorthand Emmet way, which is like this, and then hit tab to fill it. So it's li.nav-item.active. Yeah, and then hit tab, and I can't do that now. Tab. There we go. And it puts it out. Yeah. Emmet's super handy. super handy. All right, and then we need an A tag in the middle. So that would be a.nav-link, and then tab. And for now, the href is just a backslash. So the backslash will take us to the root. The link is going to be home inside the actual tag. As I've said before, I'm super lazy, so I don't feel like typing these all out, so I'm just going to copy and paste this whole block. So it's a little bit different when you do it that way. You have to highlight all 3 lines, then hold Alt-Shift and press down, and it will duplicate it. But you have to highlight the lines you want to duplicate, or just copy and paste. That also works. This one, for now, we're just going to call it users. It will eventually become a drop-down, but for now, we're just going to call it users. And it's going to be /users. Actually, sorry, that needs to be ./users and / for home. So we don't wind up navigating out of our lesson folder. The bottom one we'll leave empty for now until we do authentication next week, and then we'll add it in. Today we'll be dealing with users. We should have enough time. We'll take one more break, and we should have time to at least display the users. All right? Anybody still typing? It's like the wave. I am going to copy this and post it into Slack. So if you want to pick it up from Slack, you can. In fact, if you can just hold for just 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds, I'll be super fast. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. I'll create the code snippet super fast. Just chill out. Okay, Command V. There we go. _ main-nav.php. Boom. All right. That's in comp 1006-F19. There, for the rest of you. If you haven't joined the Slack, again, recommend joining the Slack. Next week, I'm going to issue the first 3 parts to the project. They'll be due October 26th. Like I said before, you can work in groups of up to 4. Basically, the first part of the project is going to be telling me what you want to do. So you have to come up with an idea, make a small little presentation on it. You don't have to deliver the presentation to anybody. You're just going to give it to me. So you can use Google Docs or you can use Google Slides, totally up to you. You're going to present, you're just going to give me that presentation, and it's going to basically describe what your project's going to be about. The second part will be building the first part of the authentication into the project, which is literally what we're going to learn next week. And then the third part will be the prototype of your project. So not the finished version, the prototype, which will be super raw, just get the resources working, get your CRUD stuff working, and that's basically it. That will be handed in October 26th, and I'll have that marked. That's actually the date, October 26th, is the end of reading week. So you have all of reading week to work on it, plus up to that point, because I'll be delivering it next week. And then the following semester, we will do the MVC piece, which is where you take your prototype and change pieces of it to turn it into an MVC framework. So that'll be basically what will be happening. But that'll be next week that I'll issue that. All right. Anybody still typing? No? Nice. Jump over to your browser, hit refresh. Can't see anything. Why can't we see anything? Because we haven't included it yet. We need to include it. Let's jump over to our index.php. Put your cursor on the line where you included your header. Alt-Shift down. There we go. Nice little duplication. Underscore main dash nav. Control S. Go. Learning to duplicate a line. Super, super, super handy. Or even Control-C, Control-V. That also helps. So that's going to include our main nav inside our index page with all of our menu options that we've chosen so far, right? And then we also have the header file above, and we have our footer file below. Now, when we add more and more pages, you might find that you're using this main nav quite often, and you may want to find a different way to do it, like to actually put it into your header file. Remember what I was saying before about variables, right? These files are just literally the contents are copy and pasted right in the file. Like that's what's happening. So if you define a variable above, it's usable inside that include file automatically, which means you could toggle navigations as well if you wanted to. Anyways, stick it in there. Go to your browser, not Messenger. What the heck? Go away. Stick it in there. Open up Google Chrome. Go to our file. This is not even the right side. Sorry. Go to Google Chrome. Go to our file. Hit refresh. And then you should see the home users thing there. I think we have a slight glitch in our actual code. I'll fix that for us, and we'll see that fixed. But for now, that's good enough. Let's just leave that as is. All right. The next step is for us to actually use PHP My Admin and actually hook up our MySQL and create our connection script. That's our next piece. In order to do that, there's some trickery that we have to do. I need to actually upload a file to Blackboard for you first. It will be all the SQL we're going to be importing, and then we can actually import that into our PHP My Admin. So why don't we take a 10-minute break, a quick 10-minute break to 9:15. So when this says 9:15, we'll get back to it, and then that gives me a chance to upload these files that I need to upload. All right, so let's do that. All right, we have a lot to cover in a very, very, very short period of time. So I ask that you pay very close attention because you can get lost quite easily. So at this point inside your database classes, you guys have been using you've been using Workbench, right? And you've been learning how to create databases and stuff like that using Workbench. Now you're going to learn how to use a different tool. It's called PHP My Admin. It's a very common tool for doing PHP development. A lot of people tend to use this tool. The cool thing about this tool is it's just a GUI. It's just an interface. It's no like coding or anything like that. You literally just click new to create a database. You can actually use it to create the tables. You can use the whole thing just to create everything you absolutely need for your MySQL connection. So the way we access it is actually also quite simple. There's two ways we can do it. You can either click on your little W and choose PHP My Admin. The only thing I would say about that is it will open up Internet Explorer, which sucks. If instead you open up Chrome, you can navigate to localhost and hit enter, and this will actually have a link to the PHP My Admin directly in it. If you scroll down, you'll see the tools. You'll see PHP My Admin under the tools. So navigate to localhost, scroll down, and then click that link. Now, incidentally, that link just goes to localhost/PHP My Admin, right? The default username is root. The default password is blank, unless in your MySQL class you have set it. So if you haven't set it, then leave it blank. So it's root as the username, super important, root as the username, no password, hit go. We're in. Now, I've already created the database, so give me like 3.4 seconds here to drop it and recreate it with you so that you know how to create it. All right, to create a new database, you see this new option on the left-hand side, right, in the menu. Click new. And in this section right here, we're going to type the database name. It's going to be COMP underscore, so important you use an underscore, 1006. I'm even going to zoom in so you can guarantee see that. So it's COMP underscore 106. Now you have to type it this way because the import file is looking for that database. If you don't type it in this way, the import file won't work. And then you'll be like, Sean, and I'll come over and I'll be like, you didn't do what I said. So the Latin Swedish CI, does anybody in here speak Swedish? I don't speak Swedish. All right, click on that. Type in UTF-8 as fast as you possibly can, and it will jump down in the list. And you want UTF-8 General CI. What this actually is, it has nothing to do with the Swedish language. It really just has to do with character encoding. So we want General CI. I don't know why Swedish Latin is like the default. Seems kind of weird, but. So once you have comp 1006 and the correct language encoding chosen, then you can go ahead and click create. Yes, do lowercase. It is literal. If you use capitals, it will blow up on you. Make sure you use lowercase. Yeah. Yes, you do. Everybody does. You have to scroll all the way down. Keep going. It's like way down there. Up a bit, up a bit. Right there. I see it. Up one. There you go. All right. Anybody have trouble getting this? Everybody's good? Anybody not good? All right, let's click create. Yay, we have a database. Nice. Now we could use the wizard here to create a brand new table, but that's really tedious and slow, and I don't want to go through that hassle. I want to import my SQL file because in my SQL file, I have all the SQL you need to populate a bunch of users. So on the weekend, I have no life, so I typed out all these users. There's like 95 of them. So I just came up with random names and typed out all that. I'm lying to you. That's complete bullshit. I used a library called Faker, and what I did was I wrote a loop in about 10 minutes and then looped through and created 98 users right off the bat. So now you have 98 users to populate into your database. So go over to here. We need the import. You can't see it right now because my screen zoomed in too far. There we go. You want to click import. And before you do that, you're going to want to download the file. So navigate over to Blackboard, go to Weekly Learning, Lesson 3, download this SQL file. So just click on the SQL file. It will download. There it goes. It's going to wind up in your downloads directory by default. All right. Sorry? Oh, yeah, we can. Because it's just a file, we're just going to go to the downloads folder and import it from there directly. Yeah. So go to localhost. Go to choose file. Make sure you've clicked import. Go to choose file. Navigate to your downloads directory where that went to. It's in your downloads directory. If you have a bunch of files in there, I recommend sorting by name and then scrolling till you find comp 1006. Click on it and click open. Now make sure that when you click open that it says comp_1006.sql, okay? Make sure it says that because I know some of you have some comp 1006 files in there. I don't know what they are, and you don't want this to not say SQL. It has to say SQL. Give me a thumbs up if you're good. Awesome. Give me a thumbs down if you're like struggling here. All right. Everything else can stay the same. You don't need to click any other checkboxes or any other drop downs. Just scroll to the very, very bottom. Now, before you click go, make sure your database says comp_1006, because in the SQL file, I say use comp_1006. So if yours doesn't say comp_1006, it's not going to work. You're going to get an error. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to click go, and I should wind up with a whole whack of green. Everything should be green. If you get a big pink block, did anybody get a big pink block? No? Awesome. This is the first class with no pink block. Either I've gotten better at explaining it, or just you guys are just awesome. That's great. Okay, so now we have a whole whack of users, and we can see our users. If you click on your database on the left, you'll see that you have a table called users in here. And if you click on the table, you'll see all the users in there. Now, I have a slight little bit of SQL in there that auto-generates these created at and updated at dates for you, which you can look at if you want to see it, but it is in there on the table for us. You can impress Andrew or Ben and like incorporate it so that every entry you add to your database automatically creates a created at and updated at field for you. All right, cool. I'm not going to go over the table because you have a SQL class that does that. We're not going to talk about data types. We're not going to talk about lengths and stuff like that because this is a PHP class, not a MySQL class. What I'm going to show you to do instead in PHP is how to verify that you have the correct data type going into the table, that it's the correct format, that the length is the correct length, those type of things. I will show you how to do that, how to validate those pieces of information. But when it comes to the actual database stuff, I'll leave that with Andrew and Ben so we don't create any confusion, okay? Cool. Now we're ready to connect to this wonderful bad boy. So remember that connect.php file we created? Let's go ahead and open that one up. So this is our absolute first pure PHP file. This file will have no HTML in it whatsoever. It will be just 100% pure PHP. Because of that, we actually have a choice available to us. We can create our opening PHP tag, right? And you can choose to create the closing one or just let it implicitly close, because it will implicitly close because it's only PHP. I'm going to put it in just to avoid common confusion, but you don't have to have it. Bear with me. I never remember all the contents of this file. All right. So let's type out some stuff here. So this is a simple, let's use a multi-line comment. A simple, reusable connection script. So emphasis on reusable. And I have a link. You can grab the link from the lesson plan as well. You don't necessarily have to type it out. Totally up to you. But this link will actually point to the code we're about to type as well. All the code I use, I will try my best to follow along with the manual. So that way you can make the reference to the manual a little bit easier. And any place that I directly get stuff from the manual, I will put the link in for you so you have access to it. So to connect to MySQL, we need a few different pieces. And one of the big pieces we need is a way to translate our connection details and also translate our query statements and preparation statements that we need to make. There's a few different ways that you will find on the internet on how to connect to MySQL. One of the most common ways is using MySQL I. So MySQL I is a library available in PHP that allows you just to add your details and directly connect to MySQL procedurally. Procedurally means not using objects, just using line by line. The problem with MySQLi versus what we're going to use, which is PDO, is that MySQLi is only for MySQL. So if you ever decide to switch from MySQL to Postgres, SQLite, MS SQL, or SQL at any point, or Mongo or any other database type, you have to go back through your code base and change all of your preparation statements, all your execution statements, anything you do inside there so that it corresponds with the new database. PDO gives us something called a DSL, which stands for Distributive Service Layer. What a distributive service layer is, it's like, think of it like an operator, right? Or like a translator. It's a translator that sits in the middle. And at this side, there's like 5 different people from 5 different places in the world that speak 5 different languages. But this guy over here wants to say hello to these 5 people. And he only wants to say hello. He doesn't want to have to learn how to say bonjour, auf Wiedersehen, or whatever else that he needs to learn to say in order to say hello to these 5 people. The translator, who's our DSL in this situation, the translator is going to take the hello and convert it and then tell these 5 people hello. That's what PDO is going to do for us. We're going to give it information, and it's going to translate it and then communicate with whatever database is on the other side without us having to write brand new code for a new database. It makes things a lot more transportable as well as scalable, which is something you should always be thinking about when you're developing. So, sounds confusing, not super confusing. We first need connection details. So we're going to have 4 variables. The first variable we're going to call host. And it's going to be equal to our domain name that we're using locally, which is localhost. Now I'm just going to do Alt-Shift and press down. And then I'm going to change the variable name to DB name and the value to comp_1006. And that will be our database name. So the first one is the place we're connecting to where MySQL lives. So that's localhost. And then the next piece is the database name that we want to access. Alt-Shift down, username. Username is root. That's the same identification that you use to get into PHP My Admin. The same identification you use to access your MySQL database in Workbench will be the same details you put in here. Alt-Shift down, password. And the password is nada, nothing, no password. But we do need the variable because the PDO constructor requires 3 arguments altogether. So once you have that, now we're ready to actually instantiate the connection. PDO has some oddities in it. It won't just throw an error. It suppresses them. We actually need to turn error handling on, and then we need to catch the error. So this is going to seem very new, and I'm not going to really get into it just because we're going to cover error handling and exceptions in a later class. But suffice it to say, we're going to write a small little error handler. You might be familiar with this. Try catch. Just out of curiosity, how many people have seen try catches before? A couple of you? Yeah. Java uses this. It's the exact same format too. The catch statement, inside the catch statement, the argument we give it is the error we want to catch. So when something creates an error, it actually globally yells out an event. It says, this thing has happened, right? And we can actually listen for that. That's what the catch is going to do. It's going to listen for when that error happens and goes, hey, no, you're not going to show that to the user. I'm going to catch that, and I'm going to handle it internally. So the error we're going to listen for is called PDO exception with a capital E. And we're going to tell it to go into a variable called E. So what will happen is try catch will listen for the error. PDO exception will go, PDO exception, yelling. And then we're going to say, cool, take whatever this thing returns and jam it in this little variable we're going to call E. So why is it called try catch? Try this code in between these two curly braces. Try it. Just give it a try. You know, give it a run, see how it feels. If it blows up, causes an error, throws an exception, catch it, and then run this code in between these curly braces. Now, I can't remember if you guys are the ones that I told you what these curly braces actually mean. It's a representation of a structure known as a B block, right? So these things actually represent a block. And you've seen them before. They're not exclusive to try catch. You get them in if conditions, the curly braces. You get them in functions. You get them in for each loops. You get them in while loops. You get them in anything that utilizes a block. That's where they all come from. And what they basically say is this code in the middle is being scoped to this block. So it's only going to execute if something happens on the outside. So the code we're going to try, we're going to create a variable called con, and we're going to attempt to shove a PDO connection into it. So it's PDO, all capital letters. And like I said, we're not going to really talk huge about this, but this is a class, and we're creating a new class. We're creating a new object. We're instantiating an object. I know you guys are just getting into your object-oriented class, so we won't go over this too much. I don't want to confuse you. At the end of the day, if you pretend the new's not there, it's just a function. We're just calling a function. Let's give our function some arguments, because it wants some arguments. Feed me, see more. All right. We're going to give it, and we're going to use string interpolation this time because we're actually going to plug our variables right into it. It looks like this. MySQL colon host equals, let's put a set of curly brackets in there just for placeholders. Semicolon DB name equals, and a set of curly braces just for placeholders. That's argument 1. Argument 2 is username, and argument 3 is password. String interpolation. String interpolation is one badass structuring thing. I love string interpolation. I don't like PHP string interpolation because it's too lightweight, doesn't have enough capability, not enough power. PHP string interpolation will only actually support plugging variables in, and it will evaluate the variable and return its value back, which is pretty cool. But C++'s string interpolation, you can actually shove a whole expression in there. You can do a function call in there, return back whatever the function is. Ruby gets even more crazy. You can actually do like full class implementations right directly in the string. JavaScript, same thing. Total control. It literally will just interpret anything that's inside of there. But PHP, we get very, very basic string interpolation. All we can really do is evaluate a variable. So the variable I'm going to evaluate is host, and in DB name, DB name. Now my IDE is fairly friendly and actually color codes these variables so that you can actually see them, right? Yours may not, and they may be orange. It doesn't mean it's broken, it's just how it's doing it. The only way that this won't work is if you used single quotes. Single quotes are known as string literals, and they won't interpolate. It won't evaluate the expression. You need double quotes for it to evaluate those variables and return their values. Okay, cool. So we've got a connection. Now we want to turn on error handling so that it will throw exceptions if anything goes wrong. So we're going to do con, and we're going to body shame this arrow. It's called a skinny arrow. And we're going to say set attribute, and that's a method call. So very quickly, we're instantiating an object. This object gets returned and stored in this variable. You'll learn more about that as you progress through your object-oriented Java, right? Because this is an object, objects can have things called properties and methods on them, or fields and data members, depending on who's telling you what. In order to access the method, I need to use the accessor operator, which is the skinny arrow, which is just a dash and a greater than sign. That creates a skinny arrow. This thing here is a method. It's an attribute. We know it's a method because it has parentheses. Method, fancy term for function. It's just a function. That's all it is. It's a function that is owned by the object. So we're going to stick our cursor inside there, and we're going to give it something to eat. And give it some arguments. Hit your caps lock key because it's literally all caps. Like we're yelling, like PDO, : adder error mode. Like a senior writing text messages. PDO. Don't you love how seniors always sign text messages? Like you don't know it's them? Pick up milk. Loves mom. Who else would it be? Dave? Dave wants me to pick up milk? Who's Dave? So what this is doing, the first one for the set attribute turns on error mode. The second one tells it which errors we want to listen for. So this is error mode exceptions, is what we're asking it to do. Don't really hyper focus on this. What's happening behind the scenes is quite complex. So it's just better just to type it out and be like, cool. Let's just move on. We're going to do one more thing just because we want to know that everything is working. The whole idea of try catch, right? It's going to try this code. It's going to try this line. Nothing blew up. Everything's hunky-dory. It's going to try this line. Nothing blew up. Everything's hunky-dory. We are now here. So we can write an echo statement to kind of say everything was great, right? All's good. So let's go ahead and write that. Echo, maybe not in capitals, echo, everything is great. Hail 42. If you don't know what that is, read a Douglas Adams book. The catch PDO exception, if these two blow up, if anything blows up, if our echo statement blows up, we will run this catch. Right? We want to make sure we run this catch. Actually, that's not true. If our echo statement blows up, we're fine because it's not a PDO error. It has to be specifically a PDO error for us to catch it. In here, we can now catch that and say, this is what went wrong. This was the problem. This is the thing that occurred, right? So that's going to look like this. We're going to say echo, capital letters, bail, 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 ships going down. And then we're going to concatenate it. So put a space at the end of it. We're going to concatenate it with a little dot. Concatenation in PHP is done with the period, right? It's a little dot, no plus signs. So it's a little dot for concatenation. And we're going to put $E and a skinny arrow, get message. So what's going to occur? All of our variables are set. We're going to attempt to connect. If everything works, everything is great. Hail 42, which is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, in case you didn't know. And then otherwise, we're going to echo and bail, right? If we bail, there's one other step I want to do. Our whole application requires MySQL to work. If MySQL doesn't work, then forget it. We might as well fold up and go home. So to do that, we're going to call exit. Now, exit has an alias that the other class loved, and they wanted to use it instead. So if you don't want to use exit, you can also use die. Which, I mean, goes with our message a lot better, right? So either use die or exit, totally your choice. They are literally the same thing. All right, ready to see if this thing works? Anybody still typing? I don't want to leave this page unless, okay, cool. So go to your browser, go to your happy place. Right now it says lesson 3. We want to go into the includes directory. So type includes after lesson 3 and hit enter. There's all our include stuff. just click on the connect.php file. Everything is great. Hail 42. Did anybody get bail, 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 ship is going down? Yeah. Do you want to see bail, 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 ship's going down? If you go back to your IDE, change any one of these details in any way, like localhosty, hit Control S, jump back, hit Control R, bail, 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 ship's going down, SQL state HY000, PHP network get address info failed, no such host is known. So it literally tells you what's wrong. The host you've chosen is incorrect. So I can go back and fix that, change that from hosty to just back to host. Now I kind of want toast. And then click this, Control R. Everything is great. Hail 42. Cool. So this is roughly where we ended with the other two classes anyways. You guys actually got a heck of a lot more lesson out of today because they lost 40 minutes at the beginning of their class installing WAMP. So why don't we call it for today? Next week, we will do the first pieces of our CRUD, so create and read. We will create a user, we will read a user, and we'll show a user. And then likely we'll be able to get to creating the actual login piece too at the same time. Yeah, man. Yeah, I certainly can. What the heck? What is that? That's cool. All right, Control V, nope, Command V, connect.php. Great snippet. No worries. Slack, especially in dark mode. But yeah, it kind of is. You're on the Slack channel, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's really handy. Do any of you go to the North OT thing? You ever gone to the North OT event? So once a month, Georgian hosts a North OT event. It's actually hosted by Connor Minley and Chris Naismith, who are a part of your program. Chris is a recent graduate, but he's also an instructor here at the college. He teaches in the JavaScript program. And then Connor is a recent graduate. I also work with him, actually. Anyways, North OT brings in industry professionals, and they come and do, like, talks. You get free pizza. Sometimes they host it at the TLC, so you get to drink beer and eat free pizza and watch people talk. So you can get, like, shit-faced and stuff. Anyways, it's really cool. It's free. It doesn't cost you any money. You just go. So this month, let me tell you when it is. I believe it's September 30th. Let's see here, North OT. On the channel. Yeah, so it's September 26th, which should be this Thursday, wouldn't it? Yeah, holy crap, it's this Thursday. So it's this Thursday, September the 26th, and it's likely in N building. I'll find out more information from Chris, and then I'll post it in the Slack channel, and if you want to go, just go. Feel free to go. It's usually about 6 o'clock in the evening, and it's about 2 hours long. The cool thing about it is if you're looking for co-ops and stuff, like it's industry professionals from Barrie. So like people who own businesses that are looking for people. They show up and they do like talks and you can meet them and like introduce yourself and that type of thing, right? So it's definitely worth your time. Yeah, so I'll post that. I'll also post the link to the North OT Slack workspace, and you can actually join the North OT Slack workspace as well. So, yeah. Hold on, let me stop this video.